For most of my career, I've been making work that revolves around a few central ideas. One of them being around masculine identity construction and what it means to be quote unquote a man, a southern man, a white man, but more importantly, how that identity or that masculine identity negotiates the relationship between work and play in one's life. The earlier work that I did dealt with this idea of blue collar labor and this kind of blue collar character or these blue collar identity that many Southern men have, and how this idea of work hard, play hard leads to some kind of like self-destruction. And then it led to other themes, and I just decided to explore themes in specific stories like Sisyphus, the Greek myth, and then the story, the legend of John Henry, that basically meant that there's this, well, Sisyphus is a constant, ongoing, never-ending, eternal struggle against work. And then John Henry was this amazing worker that found pleasure in his work, and because that was threatened and possibly was going to be taken away from him, he challenged the industry or the technology to see who was more worthy to do the work, and won doing it, but ultimately killed himself in the long term. So that idea always intrigued me, and I always went back to it. Even now, I go back to these Greek myths and John Henry and these stories of men that chase this masculine ideal, which ultimately expired them, which is one of the things that led me to the idea of the hero's journey, and how a hero is constructed, or how a hero is viewed, and and I'm still doing a lot of research on that, and I'll do a lot more videos later on. But one of the things that happens in the studio that I was always interested in, and how I always felt this kind of same way about sports, is this kind of groove you get into, or this zone. I remember my last year playing college football, I went to an Allman Brothers concert, and it was kind of like the first hallucinogenic experience at a concert that I had. But I remember seeing this solo before a song that Warren Haynes did, and he played slide guitar, and at that time I was unfamiliar with this notion of slide guitar. I just remember the tone and these licks that he put together were very abstract, but yet harmonic. And I remember thinking later on, when I wanted to become an artist, thinking back to that experience and saying, when I saw that moment, I want to do that with my art. I want to make people feel the way I felt when I witnessed that, and I want to feel myself how I felt in that moment while doing what I do. And then since then, I've done a lot of research about the musicians who find the pocket, or they're hitting the note, or whatever, especially improvisation bands or improvisation musicians, where they're open to this idea of letting the music take them wherever they need to go, and being able to witness that from a perspective of a spectator or a fan, it's very much like a religious experience. And a lot of fans of athletics have that same experience of watching, quote unquote, flow happen, or athletes being in the zone. So that phenomena had always been in the peripheral and then integrated into the word, but not like in a deliberate way where I was specifically talking about that phenomena. I was always trying to understand it and embody it somehow. I think the Transitioner Project was in one of those projects or performance series that I did that really captured that idea really well, and it made it happen in kind of like a live setting. Exhausting endeavor, but still nonetheless. So brings me to this idea of flow. So I want to talk about the book a minute. So this summer I was reading a book that my wife was reading for school. It was called The Element, and it just really wasn't, it wasn't more in depth. I liked the peripheral story. I liked what the premise was, but it just wasn't specific on how you find your element. It just gave a lot of stories about people that had found their element and how important it was for you to find your element, not necessarily showing what that was. So I had heard some podcasts about the Human Flow Genome Project, where there are these scientists that were studying flow and how to achieve flow and not knowing exactly what it was. So we were on vacation, so we went to the bookstore and I had looked it up online on the way there, but it was Mihai Csikszentmihalyi was the doctor's name, and it's flow. And I'll put a clip of a closer view of this. And I've got 2 more chapters left, and I'm done with the book. And it's been an incredible book. It's really kind of laid out in basic terms what flow is, and all these things that I've been studying or exploring or investigating unknowingly over the years have, in this book, become very specific in how to achieve flow, being aware of flow, what that is on a daily basis, etc., etc. So it has solidified this idea that I've had with the ideas of work and play, and how a certain type of, not necessarily type, how human beings negotiate the relationship between work and play, and how flow states streamlines them and blurs them into this one very meaningful action. Something else I've learned through reading this book and then reflecting on some of my past work and the issues that were unresolved, back to the idea of John Henry or the blue-collar worker, those characters or those people or those identities, they never were happy, and they were always seemingly chasing some kind of happiness. And this is what the book is talking about, is optimal experience. And how once you have this optimal experience, that you're always kind of chasing that again. And many times people are unaware of how to chase it or how to achieve it again. And this book is really talking about the things to be aware of to achieve flow, and being this moment which brings optimal experience and ultimately leads you to happiness and enjoyment, and distinguishes the difference between happiness and enjoyment and pleasure, and how these things are different and how they get put in a very similar peripheral of each other, and they're seen as related, and maybe they are, but one brings one type of happiness and then the other doesn't, per se. So I just wanted to talk about how we got to this point of talking about flow and the book Flow itself and how that's really informing. Now we'll be getting into more detail later. And the next book that we'll be reading is called The Rise of Superman, which is talking about hacking flow and how there is a industry now which is taking these ideas and trying to create superhumans maybe, or much more efficient thinkers and workers. And we're going to get into that later, but more specifically, this flow that we're talking about here, and then the hero's journey that I mentioned earlier, is going to marry somehow to create a body of work surrounded by narratives that use both of the structures to tell you a story through video, images, sculpture, installation.